All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. This is Paul Cochran. I'm going to be your host for this morning's webinar. Thank you for joining us and for participating and learning more about IntSights, our partner. First of all, a little bit about Konsultek. I'm an account executive with Konsultek, and Konsultek is a security consulting firm and value-added reseller that has partnered with IntSights and other leading-edge security companies for us to provide to our accounts to help them solve their cyber security needs. And a little background on who IntSights is. The challenge for IntSights is that the dark web combined with Bitcoin is the perfect storm of capitalism where hackers are attempting to penetrate your organization in hopes of monetizing their efforts. One of the most difficult challenges for cybersecurity teams is to have visibility into what types of information has been exfiltrated from their specific organizations and what to do should they find themselves targeted. So IntSights helps them to anticipate these threats. So they see these smart hackers planning their offenses before they launch their attack. They scout targets and collaborate with like-minded individuals. They seek tools and information that can help them achieve their goals. So these, for experienced cyber intelligence operatives, there are clear signals of an impending attacks. IntSights has been a fantastic partner for Konsultek, and one of their customers is quoted on the Gartner site for saying that they have leveraged IntSights for deep and dark web and social media, brand reputation, and threat intelligence, and they become reliant on them because they provide an insight into risk external to their virtual and physical walls, as well as mitigation of threats that could lead to social engineering, phishing, brand abuse, and more. Your presenter today will be Troy Dixler. Troy is a territory manager for IntSights based in the Chicago area. Troy has been in the security world for over 25 years, and he has a wide-ranging background that involves threat intelligence, vulnerability management, VPNs, among many other areas. So, Troy, I'm going to hand this off to you so you can present IntSights.
Thanks, I appreciate it. All right, so before I dive in, the area of threat intelligence is one that a lot of vendors are talking about. It comes in many forms. Most oftentimes when I ask companies what they're doing around threat intelligence, most people are looking at some specific threat intelligence feeds, whether they're coming from vendors, they're subscription-based, there's open source. And the idea behind it is to get dynamic information, such as information about bad acting IPs, domains, file hashes, URLs, and so on, and then be able to do something with them. But most people are having a problem with what they do with those feeds and how to trust them and how to know, where the sources are coming from. So what I'm going to try and do is focus a little bit on some of the problems around the threat intelligence challenge. So the first is, when you're looking at these threat intelligence feeds, most of them are generic in the sense that they are attackers that are attacking other companies, so they're known bad actors, but they're not necessarily attacking your organization. So having very focused relevance or tailored intelligence that's aimed at your organization is one of the big challenges. And then, of course, once you get visibility into it, it's, well, what is the perspective that I'm looking at here and what actions can I take? Meaning, it's one thing if every time your name is mentioned on a dark web forum, you're seeing things, and if you're in a large organization, that can start to look like a bad intrusion detection system that someone's got to spend hours going through, versus having very actionable intelligence on specific things that you can do on your behalf based on seeing those threats. So, right, we asked, sort of what are the external threats that are relevant? How do you maintain constant visibility across all the forums? Meaning there are thousands of hacking forums, web forums, IRC channels, Telegram channels, social media sites, mobile applications, paste sites. And the problem is, in order to have a team that can scour all those external forums and look for the specifics tied to your organization, you would need a couple dozen people. And even if you had those people, being able to hunt for your specific information becomes very timely. So how do you do the ongoing monitoring of all those sites? How do you take, in your security vernacular of all of your perimeter security devices, your host-based security devices such as firewalls, endpoints, web proxies, and the like, how do you update them with dynamic information? Meaning today, you configure your firewall and you have a set of rules that you've put in place. Tomorrow, right, if you've got really trusted threat intelligence sources that are giving you dynamic information, such as, right, whoever's been attacking you last week, they can change IP addresses by flipping their VPN on and off and coming from another part of the world. So in order for you guys to have dynamic defenses, you can't just be relying on static security rules that you put in at one point in time. It's getting that dynamic information coming from virtually, a threat intelligence platform. So, and then, of course, the most important question is, if you look and let's say you have a SIM deployed in your environment, which is collecting all the log data, everybody sees thousands of IPs that get blocked on a daily basis, or domains, or what have you. And the problem is, how does a cybersecurity professional decide what they should focus in on, as opposed to just seeing all these things blocked in your logs? And so that's where we talk about what we call context or enrichment. So if you can get information about the threat actor, malware, or campaigns that are behind those IPs, domains, URLs, or file hashes, it can then highlight to you, look, I need to go and focus here because either there's some malware that got through that's not being protected by my endpoint, there is a particular threat actor or a campaign that might be after my organization because I've got that additional information that I didn't see. And then more specifically, how do you really do the targeted hunting on your organization, and again, who has the time? So one of the things that we like to talk about at IntSights is how we define the clear, deep, and dark web. When we say the clear web, what we're saying is that there is a portion of the web that, of course, is indexable by search engines. The deep web, which really constitutes the vast majority of the web, is, think of them as forums or places that you've got to have some sort of username, password access to be able to scrape the information in those areas. And sometimes it might be as easy as creating an account. In other cases, you have to get invited into those forums through credibility. But the idea is that you can't just get that information if you don't have access. Hence, we call it the deep web. You can still get to it via normal web browsers. And then the dark web, which gets the most attention, which is accessible via the Tor browser. And as was mentioned by Paul in the beginning, what you effectively have is the perfect storm of capitalism, where people trying to monetize the efforts of their hacking labor, combined with the anonymity that the Tor browser offers them. What they do is they attempt to put things out there for sale, or in some cases they put things out as trophies, just trying to get credibility in the forums. But the problem is that most enterprise organizations don't even know that the stuff exists, let alone having one pane of glass to see what's out there from an external threat perspective on your specific organization. So what are the types of threats that we find on the dark web, right? Or I should say on the web in general, because this is kind of talking across all areas. We can show you things like typo squatting domains at the point of registration, which is a domain that's spelled similar to your domains, could be extra vowels, extra numbers, different top-level domains. But the idea behind this is that when you get a detection, or you can create automated rules that say at the point that there's a mail exchange record created, I want to automatically send that domain to my mail gateway, my web proxy, in an attempt to mitigate your risk against phishing attacks. We find lots of credit cards, reward cards that are, fraudulently being sold onto forums. Again, people trying to make money off them because there's a real market. Lots of data leakage. So lots of leaked credentials get posted into nebulous lists. But what happens is that it's very difficult for organizations, number one, to filter through all those and find the relevant domains or public IPs that match to your assets. But more specifically, how do you know if they're old credentials, if they're reposted, if they're new or fresh? And so part of that idea is being able to do automated checks against your Active Directory so that you can, sleep at night to know that these are not fresh credentials. They're in fact old or obsolete. And if they are new, are they active? And if so, can you force password changes? Lots of things get posted on paste sites. There are multiple types of paste sites, some on the dark web that cannot be remediated or take down, others that are put onto the clear web that people just put, whether it's intellectual property, passwords, credit cards, and the like. We can tell if your domains are targeted on DDoS lists. We hunt mobile application stores, so if you've got official mobile apps, we might find mobile apps in other stores that are minimally unauthorized, or worse, when we do enrichment on those apps, we'll find things like embedded malware, and we'll show you that evidence of malicious activity. On social media, there's a whole new series of threat types that happen where people try to impersonate your VIPs, creating LinkedIn profiles, and then trying to social engineer your employees, your suppliers, or your customers. Likewise, people will create social media profiles and either A, disparage your brand or attempt to impersonate your brand to do some similar things. So how do you keep up with all of the social media networks to know, in fact, if any of those either pages or individuals are being impersonated? And then, of course, there's all kinds of active exploits. You know, it's one thing to have a good vulnerability management platform in place, of which I'm a strong proponent, but when you marry up that vulnerability data with what's being chatted about in these dark web forums, it can really help teams understand where to prioritize their efforts, not necessarily just because a CVE has a high severity, but if it's actively exploitable and being used by whether it's people, you know, scanning up and down subnets or because they've got in through malware, however they've got in, it's important to know what vulnerabilities, what new vulnerabilities are actively being exploited. So marrying up external threat intelligence with vulnerability management data can be a very good intersection. Things about VIPs, right? So when we say very important people within your organization, could be your senior executive team, could be people that have a lot of access. But the idea behind this is that we're hunting for everything from personally identifiable information that's out there, social security numbers for sales that they could use to impersonate folks, to your VIPs being targeted in attacks, whether it be you know, phishing-related attacks or others. Having visibility into what's out there really helps you know, inform your end user population sort of what their footprint looks like into all these forums. And then, of course, we mentioned about enriching your security devices with the addition of context or enriched data to help you prioritize where to focus. So one thing important to mention, though, and I say this all the time, depending on what vertical you're in, not every company or person is an equal target. Certain verticals are higher priority. If you think from a capitalist perspective and you think about what your business does, you know, is there something that people can monetize? Do you have intellectual property that there's a market for? If you're in banking and financial, clearly you're one of the biggest targets. If you're in healthcare, you know, PII is, and patient data records are sort of the equivalent to leaked credit cards. If you're in retail, right, they'll come up with gift card generators or reward programs. If you're in software, you know, there's key generators and serial numbers and all the things that you would imagine. But again, how do you keep up with all of that stuff that's out there in a single pane of glass? And the answer is most companies currently cannot. So mentioning the Tor browser, my assumption, I know it's a pretty technical group on the call, even though this is one way. So I'm just sort of highlighting here, this is the Tor browser. This is, in a sense, the vehicle that you use from a web browsing perspective that lets you go into the dark web forums. The idea behind it is it builds sort of an anonymous VPN by hopping you through different exit nodes so that when you're surfing different sites, the idea, of course, is that you cannot be tracked. Now, that can be debatable, but this is what people are using when they go and post whatever it is that they're looking to post on these forums. So let's talk about some examples of the types of threats that we find. One thing we mentioned is around suspicious domains, or what we call typo squatting domains. The idea is that if we know your official domain names, we're going to show you all types of domains that are registered that look similar. And the idea behind this is that we'll show screenshots of the who is record. If there's a web page up, we'll show screenshots of that. If we know that the IP address or the domain that's associated with this and what we call indicator of compromise or IOC is tied to some botnet, some malware, something that is malicious in nature, we'll show you that evidence. And then, of course, part of some of the actions that can be taken is asking us to do the remediation services or takedown of those said domains. So something that folks might not be aware of, there is a new domain registrar that was launched in April of 2017. One of the co-founders of Pirate Bay, which is a well-known torrent site that basically put all sorts of software, movies, music online for free. They, every time they'd get a DMCA takedown, they would, deny it. and of course, they were very public because a couple of the members ended up going to prison. So one of the co-founders, Peter Sund, started an anonymous domain register called Najala. The hard part about Najala is if we find domains that are hosted with Najala, they will not take them down. So this is sort of a garden for giving full anonymity to any sort of phishing domains or malicious sites that go up. And the reason why I bring this up is while we focus on external remediation as one example of actionable activities based on threat intelligence, this goes to the point of that if, for example, they're registered with Najala, you cannot get it taken down, but what you can do is fortify your defenses by blocking those said domains or the IPs they resolve to at your ingress and egress points of your infrastructure, meaning your mail gateways, your web proxies, your firewalls, and the like. So other examples, types of threats that you'll find that are constantly put onto the dark web are leaked credentials, right? Every week there's a new breach, and sometimes the passwords are breached and you'll see them in the clear. Sometimes they're hashed. One of the things that people should know is that, nowadays there's a big market for hash cracking services on the dark web that people will offer computing power to run hashed passwords against large amounts of computing to then crack the hashes and show them accordingly. So even when you find credentials that have hash passwords, you can't assume that they're safe. A handful of years ago, we used to say, oh, well, you know how much computing power you'd need to crack those hashes? Well, what they're doing now is they're leasing computing power from Azure and AWS and running hash cracking services because there's a real market for it. So what we attempt to do is when these credential lists show up, we show you everything that matches to your domains, your IPs. We can check your global password policies to make sure that if the passwords meet or exceed those complexity requirements, we can automatically run them against your Active Directory and show you which ones are active, force the changes. Other use cases include where a lot of end users, their credentials will leak. They're using their work emails, but in fact, it's their personal accounts. The problem is that they haven't changed their passwords. And as a cybersecurity professional trying to protect an enterprise's best interest, you normally have no notion of who's using their work accounts for their personal emails. They don't know that their credentials have breached. So we call that shadow IT. So take the use case where Dropbox had a big breach a couple of years ago with 40 million usernames and passwords. Well, people didn't necessarily know about it and or change their passwords. Now they could be running that Dropbox on your, quote, trusted side with confidential documents, and all it takes is somebody to run a script and try those accounts with the username passwords and then exfiltrate data out of your organization. The end user didn't realize that they were hacked that way and you had no visibility before. So now being able to inform on an automated level all your end users when even their personal credentials breach. So you could say, hey, we found your password fluffy, FLU ... on this forum. If you're still using this password, please go change it. Even just getting that visibility creates better cyber hygiene for most users. As you probably know, your end customer or your end users have the same 5 passwords they reuse over and over again, and they don't change their passwords very often. We wish that everyone was using password vaults with unique passwords. The fact is that doesn't exist, and the password problem is not going away anytime soon. So having something that's constantly externally hunting and doing those automated checks and visibility becomes a critical part to an external threat intelligence program that most enterprises don't have today. Obviously, banking and financials are a really big piece. There is a virtual open market of leaked credit cards that are constantly for sale. It's amazing how good the customer service is. These folks want to prove to you that they've got good credit and or debit cards. In a lot of cases, they show enough information. So we help very large credit card processing and banks try to get in front of this and not just shut down the credit cards that are for sale. But in a lot of cases, we might do more covert action trying to figure out if it's an insider that's leaking these credit cards or where they're getting the data from. So you can imagine there's a very big market that's out there this way. Another really big problem is you have hackers for hire, that they've got some customer that wants to get and penetrate into some specific organization. When your domain is embedded within malware, it's a really serious threat. Again, most people don't have visibility into this. So in fact, when we're hunting for your domains and we find it embedded and we show it to you, we can do malware deconstruction to give you the indicators of compromise so that you can proactively push, for example, those file hashes to your endpoint security or other security devices such as mail gateways and so on, so that hopefully you get in front of it and have an early detection into targeted malware that might be out there that hopefully you have not been compromised as of yet, because of course this can be used for all sorts of ways to get information out from within your enterprise. We mentioned about VIP LinkedIn accounts. So right, people are now impersonating VIPs on social media sites. We had one customer who, there was a person impersonating a COO. They were going out and ordering all kinds of expensive equipment and material and accounts and saying, just bill the company. The company was getting contacted. They said, oh yeah, we were doing business with your COO. And of course, it was somebody fraudulently posing as the COO. So by maintaining a constant visual for your VIPs across all the social media networks becomes a really important way to stay in front of yet another scam that's been put in place. So again, these are cat and mouse games that when people find that they can become successful and make money, then they replicate it and tell the people, and it becomes more widespread. So you need fortified defenses to be on the lookout for these. And again, these are the types of accounts that we can do external remediation on, provided that they are in fact not your legitimate VIP accounts. Mobile applications, right? There are more than 350 mobile application stores that are out there. The idea behind this is if we know your official sites, we can then show you where we find other mobile apps that have embedded malware. Attempt to recruit insiders, as you can imagine, and I'm going to try and kind of go through these. So real quickly, other things to think about are, if you have these threat intelligence sources, whether they're open source, subscription-based, your own personal IOCs, how do you have them sort of aggregated, and how do you deduplicate them and put confidence ratings and get that enrichment information? That all becomes important, because if you just sort of bring in threat intelligence feeds with no context, they just look like more blocked IPs, but you don't really have any information behind them. Plus, on a lot of these threat feeds, they can become dated information as well. I'll quickly mention the Cyber Threat Alliance. There's about 15 vendors. You can see the list of vendors that are down here. Probably a lot of these are incumbent vendors and folks that are on the call today. We're all sharing the best IOCs amongst ourselves. So the CTA feed is a really premium feed that, again, we can include in our platform, but more importantly is enriching the data that comes from all of these sources. And then, of course, being able to do what we call investigations into TTPs, or threat actors, malware campaigns, and understanding sort of what their motivations are, what the IOCs that are associated, what techniques, tools, and procedures are being used. Having that sort of information at your disposal really helps in aiding, giving you defenses to external threat intelligence. And this is an example of a particular threat with indicators of compromise, and talking about, for example, it's a command and control. And of course, if you saw this matching in your firewall and coming from a threat intelligence platform, it would let you focus on, wait a second, there's some malware that potentially our endpoint is not catching, thereby you could focus your efforts there. I mentioned about automation and remediation, right? This is about being able to send threat information down to your enforcement points and or being able to do external remediation or takedowns. And again, I'm going to be cognizant on time and try to get to the end here and open it up for some questions. Thank you. Kathy, are you there?
I am here. I am looking to see. Nobody's typing in questions. We have a quiet bunch of people with us this morning. Anybody, if you have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat screen, type it in the question screen, or you should see a little raise your hand icon. Oh, wait, I see. We have a question. Oh, it says lots of information.
Well, I think, again, we only have a half an hour here. I think the message for you guys is, if you have not looked into threat intelligence, more specifically hunting the deep, dark, and clear web for what your digital footprint looks like into these forums, it is pretty enlightening. And even though we don't promise oh crap moments, although we do find them at times, if you think about this as being sort of a risk assurance of having 20,000 eyes into all these forums so that at the moment or the point when things are put out there, you minimally have visibility and or you can take action. That's the critical missing piece to most folks' cybersecurity programs, and something that, you know, we're pretty passionate about.
So we did have just a question. Can we receive slides of what was presented? Can we make that available for the folks?
Absolutely.
All right, we can do that. The answer is yes. Anybody else have questions? Of course, we're available for you offline. If you'd rather not post questions here, we most certainly can handle them offline. If you do not know who to contact me or contact me, Kathy, and I will get you in touch with the right person. I'd be happy to help out. But I guess that's it for today. I would like to thank everyone for your time. I know how busy everybody is, and I appreciate you joining us here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Troy. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.